Okay, today's lesson is in sighting. And in doing this, we are standing at an easel for the first time, so just a word about that is important. I've got a still life set up in front of me, and then I've got my drawing pad set up at an easel. In doing that, I want to make sure that I've got a clear, clean relationship between my still life and my drawing pad. Since I'm right-handed, I'm going to have it off to the right side. If you were left-handed, you'd have it on the opposite side. I also want to make sure that my easel is positioned so that my arm is comfortably angled down just a little bit. The pad is angled up to my eye line, but my arm is in a relaxed position this way. If your easel is up too high, the blood flow to your arm will be restricted and your arm will fall asleep. So angling it down to the middle of the pad is the best position. Okay. As I'm looking at my drawing pad and looking at the still life, I'm thinking that I'm looking through an imaginary window, a glass plane, which is right here, right here. Can you feel it? I'm a bad mind. And hopefully you can see what I'm looking at. It's a window that's right here at arm's length, and I'm viewing the still life through this window. That window is this plane right here. I'm convincing myself of that window, the flatness of that, and then I can bring this information to the flat page. I'm going to be drawing this cube. Cube is a very simple form, very simple object, a box. But it's very confusing too. And a lot of people say the cube is too boring, but for me, the cube has so much information in it that it's not boring at all. We might think back to right and left brain. When we're thinking about a cube with our left brain, we're thinking, well, a cube has 6 sides. Each one is a square. Each line in the cube is exactly the same way. Every angle is a right angle. All the lines are parallel. That's what a cube is. And so what I'm seeing there doesn't agree with what I'm thinking of when I think of cube. When I think of cube, I'm thinking this. And that's going to be in the back of my mind. I've got to make sure that that's not what I'm drawing. I'm not drawing this isometric drawing of a cube. An isometric drawing is great for architectural rendering. All of the lines are parallel at 30 degrees. All of the lines that are parallel in the real world remain parallel. All of the planes of the cube are exactly the same. So how do we get started? We're going to start with the front line of the cube, the line which is closest to me. And I've determined that I want that to be about this size on the pad. And from that, the arbitrary length of that line, I'm going to determine everything else that I do throughout this drawing. I'm going to keep my drawing light so that I can erase it. If I decide it's not right, I can erase it. I've got my eraser handy here. I can move things around. I'm going to plan on doing that. But gradually I'm going to darken the line as I become more convinced of its accuracy. So, sighting. In sighting, there's 3 different things that we're looking for. The first is comparative measurements. When I measure something up here and compare it to something else, and compare it to something else, and compare it to something else, those comparisons give me accurate information that I can then relate to the page. So my comparative measurements here should agree with the comparison of the measurements that I'm taking in sighting or viewing the actual object. So comparative measurements is the first kind of sighting that we'll be doing, but actually I'm going to move to the second one right away. And the second one is finding angles. As I put my pencil at arm's length on the window, the pane of glass, and rotate my pencil, I find different angles. If you think about the minute hand on the clock and give meaning to each one of those minutes. When I was in grade school, I used to watch that minute hand. It would go a little bit, a little bit, a little bit each minute. And it made a big difference whether it was 12 minutes after the hour or 13 minutes after the hour. Being able to differentiate those minor increments of angles will be really helpful in sighting and bringing angles to the page. So what I'm going to do is start from this point, which is at the top of our front line of the cube, and find an angle for the top section going off to the side, to the right side. And then I'm going to start on my glass plane and rotate until I find that angle. There it is. It is 13 and a half or 14 minutes after the hour. I'm going to bring that information to the page, and there it is. It's just about like that. Back and forth from my glass to my pad. Yes, that makes sense. That's about right. Let me go down here to the bottom one. That one is about 13 minutes after the hour. And I'll bring that one down. It's just about like this. You want to make sure you're bringing that information as accurately as you can. Don't want to find an angle like this and then change it as you move it. Make sure you lock that in and bring it over here. Let me find the top line or top angle. And as I rotate along the glass plane, my tendency is going to want to push back in as that actual line is pushing back in. But if I do that here, it's like I'm breaking the glass plane. Don't want to break the glass. I want to just rotate along that clock face. So I'm finding that angle, and it looks like it's just about a 45-degree angle, about like this. 43 maybe. And then finally the line on the bottom. And that one's a little bit steeper. That one looks like at least a 45-degree angle. Okay, so I've got the beginnings of my cube. I have one accurate measurement. Now I can start to compare measurements. If I measure that line and then compare it to the top line is just a little bit smaller. So let me try that here. Top line should be just a little bit shorter than this measurement. It should be right here. So instead of here, it should be right about there. And that should be about the length of that top line. How about the bottom line? How long should that one be? Again, I'm going to compare it to this line. There's the vertical line, and then the bottom angle is a bit shorter. I would say to right about here. And if my information is correct, that gives me a line right about there. Now, how long are these lines? That's a little bit tricky. Let me see. It's a little bit more than half of this. So I would say it's about that long. Bring that information, I'll just rotate it over to here, and that's about where that information should be. And where is this line? Compared to the vertical. Yeah, just a little bit more than half. So again, about that much. And that should be about where this is. Now, the top, we've got the front plane, we've got the left plane, left side. So I'm going to find an angle from here, and that looks like it's about 13 or 14 minutes after the hour, like this. And then finally, I'm going to find that last line of the cube, which is just about like this, and bring that down here. There we go. And there we have what hopefully looks kind of like the cube we're observing from this angle. Only 3 faces of the cube, complex angles, different measurements for every line, but that looks pretty much like it should here. Now, this is the tangible information, but there's intangible or make-believe information, which is just as important in drawing this cube. And the most important one of these will help us to prevent from having this uplifted top plane. And that is looking at the relationship between this point and this point. Now we know that any 2 points can determine a line, the shortest distance between 2 points. So there's information here, right there, and right here that I can observe and make sure that I'm drawing it out. So I'm going to find the angle between those 2 points, and it's like this. There's that. And I'm going to bring it to the page. And guess what? My line is a little bit off. My line is too much of a 45-degree angle. It needs to be down a little bit. It needs to come down to about here. So maybe I need to bring this down a little bit more. And maybe I need to bring this down a little bit more. Let me double check those angles. That looks better actually. That's a correction, good. And this one over here, that still looks okay. Need to bring this in just a bit. So I've redrawn these lines maybe 10, 12 times now. And in doing so, I've determined that the lower lines here are more accurate. I'll get rid of the top ones. Get rid of the information that didn't make as much sense. And that should correct my cube a little bit, make it a little bit more accurate. There's more information. We could look at this point to this point. We could look at this intangible from here to here. We could look at this intangible. And all of that, and this one too, all of that information is really helpful in cross-checking and making our cube more how we're seeing it. I'm going to take a look at this line right here because this is an important one. That is very close to horizontal. I can always relate to the horizontal lines on my pad and in my window and see if that makes sense. So I'm going to sight that angle from the left side to the right side, and that angle's down just slightly. And it needs to angle down just slightly, like 16 minutes after the hour. Just one other hint for doing these angles. Sometimes if you're not too convinced of the subtlety of something like that, you might use two pencils and keep one horizontal and then angle the other one so that you see the difference and bring that to the page. So you might keep one horizontal, and now I'm doing the right top line and bring that to the page. Yes, that looks good. How about this one here? Let's do that. Keep one horizontal and bring the other one to the page. That looks a little bit off. I might need to make a little correction there. Okay, so that's the basic concept for sighting using angles and using comparative measurements. And that should help us draw the cube.